I want to go to one of our Legal Beagle experts. He's a great friend of the show, and he's brilliant for a whole host of reasons. Josh Hammer, host of The Josh Hammer Show. He's authored a brilliant book called Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and the Destiny of the West, which I want to get into because, of course, tomorrow, October 7th, 2 years since that heinous attack on Israel. And Josh, I welcome you to the show, sir. Good morning.
Chris, good morning to you. It's always a pleasure.
Could I just get your read quickly on this judge and what the justification would be to tell the president? Because this has been addressed in previous rulings, as I understand it, and if memory serves, even the Supreme Court didn't say it was out of bounds for the president to use the National Guard to restore order, right?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to briefly address the very astute point that you made, Chris, which is that simply because the judge happens to be a Trump nominee, therefore, we can expect this to be kind of a Clarence Thomas, Antonin Scalia type jurist. I mean, trust me, I wish that were the case, right? And sometimes it, in fact, is the case. I mean, I clerked on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit for an amazing lower court judge, Judge Jim Ho. I saw that court transformed with my own eyes. So a lot of these judges are very good, but sometimes when it comes to the lower court judges, Chris, there's still a process called the blue slip process, where in these blue states like Oregon, the president has to compromise, at least for the appellate judges, with the typically Democrat senators there. You're going to get a lot of compromise picks here. And as everyone who's read their history knows, Otto von Bismarck, the late 19th century German statesman, famously described politics as this sausage-making process where you don't really want to know what goes inside there. That's kind of how this whole blue slip process for judicial nominees works there. That's how you get a judge like this judge out in Oregon. The ruling on its face is totally ludicrous. You have federal buildings that are not being protected by the Portland, Oregon Police Department there. First of all, I don't particularly care even on its face whether the local police department is protecting the building. They obviously should do that. But for present purposes, I think it goes without saying that the federal government wants to protect its own building and its own employees there from anarchy, from Antifa, anti-ICE sentiment there. They have all the right to do so there. But some of these rulings that come out of Oregon over the past week or two, they say, oh, it was only 3 attacks or 3 disturbances or 3 violations against the peace of the federal building. I mean, first of all, who are you? I mean, who are you to say to the President of the United States that 3 is not enough to justify more troops, more presence to protect the federal building there? That's totally ludicrous on its face. Chris, I've been waiting for some sort of showdown where the President of the United States and the legal team there in the White House essentially feels a need to flip 2 middle fingers to one of these lower court rulings. We're getting perilously close to that. If this judicial insurrection does not abate ASAP, I think that we're going to get a standoff that's not going to end well for the judges, frankly.
May I ask again, if memory serves, that the Supreme Court, when it came to Los Angeles, didn't they, am I misremembering this? Didn't they, or a higher court anyway, or I thought there was an actual court decision that President Trump had the right to deploy the National Guard to L.A. when it had devolved into riots. Am I misremembering that or no?
I'm trying to remember the exact details of the procedural posture of the case, Chris, but I'm pretty sure you're right. So you did have the Ninth Circuit that immediately stopped it, somewhat predictably there. And then the Supreme Court, if memory serves, did issue a terse order that essentially said, we're going to allow this to proceed for now. The statutory authority is pretty clear. There's a statute from the Thomas Jefferson presidency, literally from 1807, 1808, right around there, called the Insurrection Act, which allows the president to deploy the National Guard in situations where there is municipal, statewide, domestic anarchy that requires the federal government to step in. Now, you can't send in active duty, boots on the ground, the camouflage, the soldiers, Marines there. That's a separate statute called the Posse Comitatus Act from the late 19th century, around the Reconstruction period. But the left, I think, Chris, what they're doing is they're deliberately muddying the waters and trying to confuse people here. These are not the same thing. The National Guard is not the same as sending in the 101st Airborne. Okay, the National Guard is not the same thing as sending in SEAL Team 6 to defend the federal courthouse in Portland, Oregon. There, these two things are simply not the same. There are different statutes. There are different legal regimes, different governing authority. The president is on very firm footing on one hand. The other hand's a little questionable, but he's not talking about the latter. He's not talking about sending in SEAL Team 6. He's talking about the National Guard. He's a lot more legal one way there.
Chicago police officers en route to help federal agents who were being surrounded and menaced by an angry mob of ICE protesters were ordered by their chief of patrol to stand down. over the weekend. Talked about this earlier. Josh, it seems to me that these blue state cities and governors are more interested in protecting the rioters. And as a political matter, I mean, you were just discussing maybe a showdown with judges in the legal system. As a political matter, I don't know. I haven't seen any polling on it, which tells me I'm probably right, because they'd be polling and letting us know that the American people weren't supportive of President Trump if they had numbers to suggest that were so. I suspect the American people want control of these American cities and probably stand with Trump on trying to get it done.
They absolutely do. And President Trump is very smart, Chris, to focus, among other places, on Memphis, Tennessee. So I've said from the get-go that the sweet spot here for this whole National Guard Let's Restore Order campaign, which is a very successful and, as you correctly note, politically popular campaign, I think the sweet spot is you look for blue cities in red states, because when it comes to coordination between the feds and the state governments, the actual authority when it comes to sending the National Guard doesn't really have to do with the mayor. The mayor is somewhat effete and impotent when it comes to trying to resist this sort of thing. It actually really comes down to the governor of the state. I mean, think back to the late 1950s when Dwight D. Eisenhower sent in the National Guard to Little Rock, Arkansas to try to desegregate the schools in the aftermath of Brown versus Board of Education. It was the governor of Arkansas, Governor Falvus, who was infamously standing there at the door to not allow Eisenhower's National Guard there into the school. So it's really up to the governor to coordinate when it comes to the National Guard. So when it comes to a place like Tennessee there, well, you have a great Republican governor and Governor Lee. Memphis is a blue city. That's a sweet spot. Chicago is a slightly more complicated picture there. I personally applaud the president's efforts when it comes to Chicago. I went to law school in Chicago, Chris. I lived there for 3 years. Beautiful, world-class city. I mean, absolutely, genuinely stunning, world-class city that has gone to hell in a handbasket, unfortunately. Really sad for those of us for whom that city has a very special kind of memory and attachment there. So I wish the president a world of success when it comes to outright blue cities like Chicago, but I think Memphis, Tennessee, St. Louis, Missouri, Austin, Texas, cities like that, blue city, red state, I think that's the sweet spot.
That makes sense. Josh Hammer is with us, host of the Josh Hammer Show. Follow him at Josh_Hammer on X. His book is Israel and Civilization, The Fate of the Jewish Nation and Destiny of the West. You and I have talked before. It wasn't too terribly long ago. You were on the stage having a debate about the future of Israel, America's role there. And it was famously hosted by Charlie Kirk. And the debate going on amongst conservatives about Israel, our involvement, and the future was a healthy one that Charlie thought was healthy and important to host. Subsequently, since his death, we've found that there was a memo he wrote to Benjamin Netanyahu saying, I'm concerned you're losing the messaging war here domestically. You need help. But it was always clear to me anyway. And I mean, everything that Charlie's ever said, at least recorded, and now we have in writing, said he was supportive of Israel and remained that way. But he was concerned, and I'm now seeing it more aggressive than ever before in his death, this movement amongst some prominent conservatives who are trying to tell their audiences that Israel is somehow the aggressor and the bad guy, and we ought to turn our backs.
Yeah, Chris, Charlie was a close friend of mine, as you know. We actually spoke literally the night before his tragic and untimely death. I was on a small Zoom call with him and a couple others. We were literally talking through this topic. I was giving Charlie advice for how to message on this issue on his forthcoming campus tour. You know, he kind of jokingly mentioned to me, he was like, Josh, I'm going to mention your book, Israel and Civilization, and it's so good. And that was literally our last conversation. It's just so tragic. This letter that he wrote to the prime minister, Chris, I read back in June or July or so. And there were so many people in the aftermath of his horrific assassination, Candace Owens, folks like that, who were saying that, oh, Charlie was turning on Israel. He was ready to sell them out and renounce his life's work of sincere and genuine friendship with the Jewish people and the Jewish state. But this letter that he wrote to Bibi Netanyahu, Chris, literally begins. The first sentence of the letter is, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's a close paraphrase, as a Christian, one of my greatest joys in life is making friendships with the Jewish people and defending the state of Israel. That's literally the opening sentence of this letter. So Charlie was simultaneously very critical of Israel's handling of the PR war, which, by the way, I've been critical too. Israel is really not good at this, to be honest with you. So he was critical of that while offering very friendly advice from a genuinely principled place of sincere, biblically, theologically grounded friendship. Charlie was an amazing friend to the Jewish people, an amazing friend to the Jewish state. There are some horrific bad faith actors that are really trying to to muddy the waters and confuse people as to what he actually said. Fortunately, Chris, there is this thing called the internet. There is this perpetual memory bank of Charlie's amazing clips over the years of criticizing Hamas, criticizing Iran, defending Israel, etc. there. And we'll see what happens. But one thing that I know for sure is that as this debate continues onward, we really could use his moral clarity. And it's just a tremendous loss, not just for the Jewish people, but really for the United States of America and really for the whole world, I would argue.
With about a minute to go, Josh, here's a question that I love to volley, and nobody's really answered well enough for me yet. On those that are critical of Israel, particularly those who would call themselves conservatives, why no mention of radical Islam? None. Like zero. No concern whatsoever about the slaughter of Christians and radical Islam. Why?
Yeah, great question. And Charlie picked up on this, by the way. Over the past year or so of Charlie's tragically truncated life, he was starting to go really hard on Islam. He was making this a repeated leitmotif of his commentary. He was trying to kind of paint this civilizational battle between the Judeo-Christian biblical West and the forces of Islamist subjugation. It was a very astute messaging point that he was making there in the final month to year of his life. But Chris, some of the worst actors, if I can just name one name, Tucker Carlson, who increasingly is off the rails on this issue, he's become somewhat of a Sharia law apologist, actually. I saw this remarkable recent clip of his talking about how, Sharia law is not that bad. Look at Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, look at Abu Dhabi, UAE, these are flourishing world-class cities. No, actually, Sharia law is really bad, actually. And Americans should be really fearful of Sharia law's encroachment in places like the Dallas, Texas suburbs, Dearborn, Michigan, places there. This is something that is not easily compatible, is the most charitable way I can put it, with Western civilization. I would argue it's not compatible at all with Western civilization there. So the threat remains Islam, as anyone with any reading of history knows, Chris.
Josh Hammer, it's Israel and civilization, the fate of the Jewish nation, and the destiny of the West. I am so grateful for your perspective, and we're going to continue to lean on it. You're genius. Thank you, my friend, so much. Have a great week.
The Chris Stigall Show podcast.